Here about a very interesting and accomplished career of Susan Van Pelt Petry. And the topic of her lecture today, A Body of Knowledge, A Choreographer's Life. And she's had such an interesting career. I'd like to try and just summarize it, but it's a 40-year overall career in choreography, dance, teaching, and is serving as an administrator. Susan had been in the Department of Dance and served as the chair of that department for 10 years. And she retired in 2022. She had also had other very interesting teaching experience, having been a professor at Ohio University. But I also found it very interesting that she had taught dance in Western Australia and in Taiwan, and has won numerous awards for contribution to dance education. She served on the board of the National Association of Schools of Dance for 6 years and was president of the Ohio Dance for 2 terms. She served as the president. So I'm really looking forward to this. I explained to her 2 of my granddaughters are enamored with dance, and so I'm hoping to be a little bit more knowledgeable after this lecture. So, Susan, thank you for offering to do this, and thank you all for coming.
Well, first of all, this is second position.
What's that?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Griever, very much for that nice introduction. Can you hear me? All right. And if you start to not hear me, just say something because I can speak up. And actually, I can move too. So thank you for coming on this gorgeous day where everyone should be in their garden. There's a lot in that bio, but what I want to underline today is that I am a choreographer. For over 4 decades, I made over 100 dances, works, pieces. Choreographers use those terms interchangeably. The book project I'm talking about today is a collection of 10 chapters, 1 piece of choreography for each chapter. I've chose 5 solos and 5 group works. These are works that were performed multiple times and frankly, some of my favorites. I wanted to write about them. The proposed collection is titled Body of Knowledge, A Choreographer's Life. It's a work of creative nonfiction. It fits in the genre of artist memoir, where there are autobiographical stories from my life, but it's always through the lens of choreography that I made. I always enjoyed writing, but it wasn't my focus. I did journals, records of choreographic processes, poems, texts that I incorporated into dances. Of course, I wrote my share of grants, proposals, program reviews, assessments, the fun stuff. Okay. With retirement, I wanted to shift my creative energies into writing. It's an art form I can take with me wherever I go, in whatever condition my aging body is in. And I don't need a studio or funding to pay dancers. And I love language. I've taken some workshops, participated in some writing groups, and with thanks to a grant from the Emeritus Academy and from the Dance Preservation Fund, I've been able to hire and work with some editors as a big part of my learning curve. I've published some poems and some essays, and as I pursue a home for this book project, I look forward to your comments and questions at the end. It'll help. While I'm new to the writing and publishing world, I'm a veteran art maker, a creative with 40 years of experience. So I'm working on translation in a way between choreography and writing. And the process of the two has a lot of similarities. In choreography, I might uncover, discover, and create movement. Writing, one is discerning, articulating, and finding words. You collect movement, collect words. You arrange and structure movement phrases. You arrange sentences, paragraphs, dialogues. You build patterns, you build structure. You find the tone, the quality of the voice. You find a piece. You find the voice of the work. You use music. You use rhythm. You turn a page. With both processes, pieces can develop in a linear manner, chapter 1 to the end. first movement to last movement, but that's pretty rare, as I'm sure you can imagine. I do massive rearrangements and reordering of sections. Cut and paste happens in both processes. And cut, 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 cut. But there is a difference in where the body is in the making and other bodies. When choreographing, I was usually physically enacting the process. You can't just think a dance into existence. Whether making a solo for myself or working with a group, there's the very real presence of complicated bodies, humans, in the room. These people, fully in their bodies, have to contort and negotiate the movement. With writing, pretty much my fingers. But writing is at its best for me when my body is actually fully present. My breath is open. My energy is sparked, and I have exactly the same sensation of listening for the next thing, the next word, the next phrase, as I did when listening for the next movement, the next rhythm, exit, entrance, listening with my whole body and mind. By listening, I mean being on top of all the craft at one's fingertips, having a surplus of ideas, and then letting go, abdicating to a quietness, letting all that material you've been throwing around to speak back to you, to listen for this, go here, this way. So in the studio, I take that one short phrase of truest movement and dig into it, interrogate it, repeat it, bigger, smaller, faster. Find the answer to that movement as if it were a question. Same with writing. I rewrite, clarify, argue, focus the syntax, stay with the voice, set the scene more clearly, move action forward, call back, foreshadow, use punctuation and white space to create tempo. So writing is a lot of fun and uses my choreographic thinking. In these essays, I'm attempting to weave threads of stories about dance, about making dances, family, friends, geographies and cultures, objects, as well as psychological and emotional reckonings. I'm striving to create a visceral portrait of how making dances is a lens, can be a lens, on understanding life's passages. To be clear, my dances do not set out to tell stories of my life. They strive to touch on broader themes of human nature, themes of how we navigate the startling beauty of life, the fragility of existence, our vulnerabilities, and the stunning ability to survive, the power of tenacious spirit. Through my writing, vulnerability and tenaciousness is seen through the arc of life: birth, childhood impressions, living a life with relationships, with things, and aging, letting go, musing on mortality and death. You may discern these themes in the following excerpts from 3 chapters. Chapter titles are the titles of the dances that are featured in them. Are you ready? This first chapter is the first chapter of the collection. And it is a celebration. It celebrates love of language and dancing. So it's a good starter. It's a solo that I first performed in 1986 and multiple times since, talking it through. I went to my first dance class at age 4. My mother had recognized my inclination to move to music, and she placed me in a creative movement class for children. I remember nervously entering the room for the first class. What was I supposed to do? It was a large room, wooden floor, empty of furniture. It opened out onto a veranda, so there was just natural light coming in from the garden beyond. I was wearing a black scoop net, itchy, short-sleeved leotard. Barefoot, I quickly learned to love the feel of the shiny floor, the teacher and her instructions and movements, and the quiet, steady beat of her hand drum. This was the first of thousands of dance spaces I have loved in my life, empty of furniture, but not empty of movement, design, magic. The teacher guided us to go low, go high, run quickly, freeze, stretch wide, make yourself into a little ball. I discovered how my body could shape something into existence. With just a hint of a word, I could make a dance. My body could represent, but also become something, anything, joy, the sun, a shell, a cat, being mad. At the end of class, she led us to make a story with movement. She asked us to be seeds, and then the rain that comes down on the seeds, then the shoots coming up out of the earth, and the wind that blows, and the flowers and that bloom off that shoot. Linking words to sensations to movement made complete sense to me. I grew up in a family that loves language. We play with words, read books out loud. My father wrote a memoir. My mother authored essays. My siblings are poets. We're all writers, although my becoming a writer surprised my father. Before he died, very recently, he said he would always thought of my siblings as the word people. I was the dancer. So he was tickled to find out my joy in putting together a word or two. He loved a good pun. We both did. Let me tell you about the one about saga. It's a long story. Presenting an evening of solo pieces, I often began with talking it through, an improvisational dance that had me and the audience speaking to each other. I never assume audiences know how to read a dance. So I like to offer clues and cues rather than a good luck, you're on your own attitude. Of course, like good poetry, if the piece is strong and clear with its own inner logic and integrity, a viewer can hopefully go straight to the experiencing of the work and slip past the need to understand. Because contemporary choreography is often not story-based or grounded in language, viewers on a search for meaning get frustrated. Confusion is magnified by the fact that there are actual people up there dancing, not, say, instruments making sounds. And it might even appear the performers are trying to say things through their movements. We are, after all, studying their faces as well as watching them do things. It's hard not to search the dance for a language, for signs. Talking it through is a dance. It's also a primer in the language of dance. Because I speak to the audience, the dance becomes a little more accessible experience. The text is scripted, but my movement is improvised. No predetermined choreography in this. I never know what is going to happen exactly. Talking it through happens in two parts. In the first, I speak directly to the audience about choreography as a series of choices. Choices about time, rhythm, about effort of the movement, which body parts can shape in what way. As I speak, my movements demonstrate each element. So I pause wherever there are choices to be made about where to go. I move around different places in the stage space. How to get there, a run, a walk, a crawl, leaps. I suggest then demonstrate how the choreographic choices combine and layer, creating perhaps emotion, metaphors, characters, tensions, resolutions. This becomes the segue to the second part, when I invite the audience to shout out words that I turn into movement. I say, give me words, images, emotions. I'm listening. My challenge and delight is to quickly discern the essence in the word thrown at me. So if it's something like teapot, I might choose a staccato rhythm playing with the percussiveness of teapot, or a delicate tiptoeing, maybe the essence of civility, of comfort, along with the fingers wriggling from low to high, the essence of nice aromas, along with broad and round and fulsome reaches, contractions and twists, just conjuring the almost spiritual quality of tea and tea ceremonies. Then I might shift to a quick literal moment, putting an arm out and tipping over. Combining occasional straight-up representation with non-literal, abstract aspects of each word offered viewers a key to this idea of abstraction. Talking it through brought back my childlike awe of dancing the story of a seed sprouting into a flower. I had wild fun with the physicality of the improvisation, but it's complicated. As a trained dancer, I'm very aware of the elements of craft, the demands of technique, the unpredictability of audiences, my own shortcomings as a dancer, physical and emotional. Improvisation demands a very high level of rigor. The most wickedly fun element is always the moment between the words coming to me, the split-second liminal space, the sliding from one to the next. In one performance, I was dancing God as a series of wide reaches from low to high with both arms spread wide, asymmetry to symmetry. When I reached the top, someone called out, "Childbirth!" My hands came together above my head, and interlacing my fingers, I did a strong push downward as I moved into a deep squat. The way God informed childbirth, both in terms of language and movement and physicality, gave both words more resonance. This sort of dynamic juxtaposition happens every few seconds in the piece, and making that shift without any stop or reset is challenging and exhilarating. The thought process in these fleeting transitions had to be lightning quick, fluent, immediate. Intuition is all. There's no time for considering planning, like clever puns or humor that comes from wordplay and unexpected associations. The process, act, react, do, think, is happening a million times in seconds as my mind observes, imagines, and listens, and my body shapes thoughts into fluent action. Words have meaning, movement, color, tone. This I love. A teapot is a thing, also cultural artifact with its own history, stories. It's tactile, aromatic, it's ordinary, it's special, it's in my kitchen, it's in a museum. It is one word that packs many layers of meaning, association, relationship. Words come from ancient utterances related to environment, cultural codes, the way people have to survive together. Take any word and grow it out or in or up or down, and you'll find trails and branches and interconnected weavings of meaning. Give me words, images, emotions. I'm listening. Not really, not today. I mean, I am listening, but I'm not going to dance today. The second chapter is sort of in the middle of my collection and touches on a common theme in a lot of my work about women's lives. This work is called Is a Woman, and I think I must have performed it over 100 times, first in 1986. Some people called it my signature work. My grandmother shows up in this, as does my love of fabric and clothing. 1985. I enter the studio carrying a light blue silk chiffon floor-length ball gown that my grandmother wore in the 1950s. I wriggle into the tight sheath dress underneath the chiffon. There is a piece of choreography to be discovered in this dress. The dress came to me from my maternal grandmother, Helen Wistendale, Bobby to me. Bobby's presence was constant in the evolution of the solo. She was born in Norway and raised in England. Her accent was lightly British. She laughed well, a high, glorious upsurging of gleeful laughter. In my 20s, as I work in the studio with the dress, I carry a romantic, idealized vision of my grandmother's life. I'm in love with the dress in all of its drapes. Love the way it fits, love being me in it, but I discover that despite the generous layers of diaphanous fabric, I can't move much. I'm tripping, getting stuck. It's hard to breathe. She was just 20 when she met her husband, then 40. George Devereux Bryson, nicknamed Papa to us kids. Helen and George, Bobby and Papa. George worked for an advertising agency in New York and happened to be in London at Christmas time. An acquaintance introduced him to the Wistendale family, and they invited the lone American to spend the holidays. There he met Helen, her siblings, and her mother, a widow close to George's age. By New Year's, he had asked Helen to marry him. What did he say to persuade her to give a quick yes? They married on January 9th and immediately set sail for New York. My mother, their only child, was born that November. Before my mother died in 2019, she was working on a memoir of her father. I think she was trying to get a grip on her parents' marriage and her own distanced role in the family. After her parents passed away, she researched, reread letters, rifled through her own memory, and concluded that her father was gay. As a rising executive in the advertising industry, he likely felt compelled to have a wife and child to demonstrate 1930s corporate America's acceptable way of living a life. As my mother wrote about this and shared her discoveries in the early 2000s, a lot of pieces fell into place. It did make sense. Always separate bedrooms, friends George liked to have as guests, the way Bobby contained herself to be in this marriage. She benefited, but she also gave something up. They both gave something up. Perhaps George made clear to her that their marriage contract meant that he respected and provided for her, that they could be trusting and affectionate, but in the absence of romantic or sexual intimacy, she would have a life of comfort. Helen's pleasure in attending gala events, post-theater parties at Sardi's in New York was epitomized in this blue chiffon gown. For many rehearsals, it's just me in the dress, finding out what goes where, what layer can do what edge can I pick up and toss over a shoulder, or how a back hem can flip over and become a veil. Holding corners of the chiffon, I create images of butterfly wings, tornadoes swirling, a model in a glamour magazine, water spraying, a girl flirting, a woman dancing. With every drape, wrap, or twist of the chiffon, another woman stepped out. Soon the studio was full of women. Important women in my life, archetypal women, women from art imagery, my memories of encounters with women and girls in many cultures, and me with my own, so far, accrued histories, sensibilities, and dreams. Thematically, the dress's structure established the tenor of the piece as a woman. The inner tight fit versus the outer flow and drape. The dress said, be beautiful and desirable, but also be under control. I had seen these conflicting constraints and expectations in the lives of women I knew, notably my mother and grandmother, and had encountered them already in my own growing up. I wanted to create a section of the choreography where the dress performed one of its primary purposes, dancing at a ball. This was a dress that was designed to give a woman a chance to swoop and twirl, to be swept up into a waltz with a dreamy partner, to kiss and be kissed. I practice the waltz. I go backwards as a woman does. I had to figure out how to kick the chiffon behind me so I didn't trip. This dress is complicated. It's gorgeous. I tried to imagine young Helen in it. I found a big band recording a hesitation waltz, the kind of music Bobby liked to hum. The hesitations are like a intake and hold of breath at a moment of anticipation, and when the melody starts again, the breath is let out, creating energy and flow. It is like the music is flirting, offering something, then holding back, then offering again, and then playing coy. I wonder now, did my grandmother flirt? Did others flirt with her? Were there affairs? The element of anticipation in the music creates the perfect theme for the choreography to advance, retreat, reveal, hide, give, hold back, all elements of flirtation and seduction. I was building a story in this section of a girl shyly starting to dance and enjoying the flirtation, but at the end, when the waltz is over, the fun of seduction turns less innocent and sweet. At the beginning, though, as the big band music starts, I reveal the shape and drape of the dress with a little satin bow in the front on a kind of ta-da moment in the music. The reveal is accompanied by a direct smile at the audience, as if the young girl is saying, "Yes, look, isn't it lovely? Aren't I looking so pretty?" During a tantalizing musical build, I set up to dance with a partner. With my back to the audience, head turned over my right shoulder, I pull up to my toes, torso tense, as if the partner just wrapped their right arm around my waist. I place my left hand on their shoulder, my own shoulders starting to arc and twist in a ballroom back bend. Then my right hand, still holding the corner of the fabric, reaches up to take the partner's left, set up in classical ballroom pose, closely held and ready to follow. I step backwards with my left and begin the waltz. One measure of waltz, one measure of hesitation, then falling back into the waltz itself. As the section develops, I dance a woman with more complex layers of desire, madness, devil-may-care. She grinds her pelvis in circles, thrusts her hips forward, throwing all the fabric backward, and then stumbles to regain composure. By the end of the music, the girl evolves to show narratives of desire, of being out of control and being controlled. She dances the duality of external composure with internal passions. This dress contains, but also unleashes. On the very last note of the music, I move forward as if there is a suitor ready to take my hand and kiss it. I offer the back of my right hand, curtsy, while raising my hand up as it's taken to their lips. And my mother's essay is about her father. She writes about the sadness she felt about finding out she was maybe just needed for show, a trophy child. She maybe didn't feel loved in some fundamental way. I can imagine Helen maybe didn't really want a child. George was kind but distant. The last section of Is a Woman touches on questions of motherhood. I found Ricky Lee Jones' theme for the Pope, guitars, mandolin, accordion. The music is gentle, heartfelt, and tender. In my early months of choreographing with the dress, I added a pile of 8 white dinner napkins to the set. In this section, I hiked the dress up over my thighs, pile of chiffon gathered in my arms like a pile of laundry, and the napkins are bundled up, looking like a baby wrapped in a blanket. I take my finger to my cheek under my eye as if wiping a tear, and I use the same finger to tenderly touch the face of the baby in my arms. I look at the baby, hand floating over, as a gesture of listening, adoring, protecting. Then I circle my left leg and arm backward as if overcome by a massive sob or scream falling off balance. I haltingly run backwards with arm outstretched as if fending off danger. I put my hand strongly towards the bundle, a message of conflict. Love the offspring, keep it, rid it, be a mother, not be a mother. The making of this dance predated by over a decade my own decision or even desire to become a mother. I was choreographing on a wing and a prayer on intuition, using my own improvisational sense of what it meant to be someone else or to be my future self. Trusting imagination and intuition becomes vital in the creative process. At the end of the music, I look at the bundle of napkins in my arms and acknowledge that it is an illusion, a pile of fabric, a future, a past, a hope, a regret. I unbundle the pile and lay it on the ground, strewn like laundry. This woman is tired. How are we doing with sound? Great. One more. This chapter is called Haunted, and it's not the last chapter, but the second, almost the end. This was made in 2019, one of the last group pieces. Yes, it's a group piece. Sorry, I meant to say that. This time this is a group piece. Those were both solos. Haunted. When I was 6, I had a knick-knack cabinet. Painted blue on the inside with a faux antique frame, it hung on my bedroom wall. With 2 shelves, I arranged my favorite small objects inside, creating my own miniature museum. Seashells, rocks, small treasures, fabric. My collections have always been tactile, have always invited handling. They delight my eye and feel good in my fingers, and they are imbued with memories, with emotion. My things speak to me. In my life, moving often and traveling a lot meant that I had to keep my stuff pared down. But I felt attached to the small things that kept moving with me. Small things are easier to keep. Teddy bear, slender books of poetry, my alto recorder, an agate from Lake Superior. These things were, still are, props in the scenes I move through. These things provoke wonder, delight, a sense of attachment. They help me feel at home in the world. The details are important. My fingers and eyes know their contours, feel their edges and textures. I live life sensually. I touch things, feel their weight, absorb their colors and details. Aromas, textures, moving parts delight me. Dancing uses touch. I feel the floor. I support a partner. Sense the rush of air across my skin as I leap. I treasure both big swaths of movement and the small things that my body directly interacts with, that can sit in the palm of my hand or be cradled in my arms or perch on my hips. Sensuality, with all the senses, including the kinesthetic sense, is at the core of every dance I've made. In 2019, I choreographed Haunted, 5 dancers, 5 minutes, one of my shortest pieces. Within the dance is a narrative about life's accumulation of things and the inevitable letting go with age and death. Death unequivocally demands letting go of things, everything. 3 years after making Haunted, I found myself grappling with life's accumulations. We were empty nesters after years of child rearing, full-time jobs, and backyard parties. There were trips to Goodwill, garage sales, donations. There were inventory lists, storage units. Everything, it seemed, needed to be touched and sorted to a box, to the trash, for keeps, for later. Everything from the littlest stuff, souvenirs from national parks, rubber bands, to the biggest, scooters, shovels. What was compelling me to pare down to what is really loved and needed? I want to have my treasured things, but not my stuff. The things we keep must really matter, connect to something we care about. With Haunted, I choreographed driven by an intense sense of how details matter. Selecting, choosing, having, and holding treasures are important ways to find joy. As I choreographed, I worked to home in on essential gestures, tossing what seemed like superfluous movement. I wanted the dance to lean in on the urgency of loving life and all the important treasures I carry along the way. I used Henry Purcell's 1695 Music for the Funeral of Queen Mary. Brass instruments create powerful arcs of melodies to chant like that carry over a slow, low drum beat. The drums pound a 1, 2, 3, silent 4 rhythm repeatedly through the piece. 1, 2, 3. The musical phrases end with that pause, a gap, an empty space. I wanted to fill those spaces with dense designs of precise movement and unexpected bursts through the silences. I wanted to suggest whole cabinets of curiosities, cabinets of emotions in those few seconds of space between drum beats and musical phrases. 5 dancers enter from one corner of the stage in a low, crouched walk. Body parts make ledges, cup shapes, shelf edges, as if holding things. They begin a deliberate procession diagonally to the opposite corner of the stage. Their progress to the far corner is incremental. Takes 4 of the 5 minutes of the dance. The journey advances, then loops back a little, like life so often does. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Just before the end of the piece, at the 4-minute mark, the dancers rapidly travel back to the corner where they started, a quick retrograde, as if sucked back in time. You know, we say things like, it seems just like yesterday. Where did the time go? But memories accumulate, losses are mourned, people forgotten. But the piece doesn't end with her life flashed before her eyes. Instead, the dancers rise and begin their second and final passage to the opposite corner. This time, it is persistent, clear, undeniable. There's no going back. The brass instruments are silent on this final traverse. The drums pound their 1, 2, 3. The dancers only move in the space between the drums. They move swiftly and arrive in tableaus of poses, motionless while the drum repeats its beats 5 times. Each rush of movement gets closer to the final corner where they exit. For each of the tableaux, I ask the dancers to conjure an object, sensation, something important to them. Together, we create poses for each of those treasures. Abby's secret boxes, Ben's ancestors' photos, Maddie's tap dance shoes, Madeline's ribbons, Isaiah's bag of history. The audience doesn't need to know what the sources are, but the sense of people having dear treasures is palpable. The tableaus incorporate odd twists and tilts of the head, crooked arms and legs, as though a person is caught unawares in the midst of a thought or reverie. The tableaus are sideways glances of cherished dreams. The dancers get closer to the far corner. The last drumbeat reverberates. The dancers walk backwards and gaze back to where they entered. Then one by one, they turn, they walk forward into the darkness, they exit. One dancer lingers, her hands closed as if holding something small. She walks backwards, not yet turning to leave. Then she slowly turns, looks back over her shoulder one last time. Her hands open. She turns to walk forward, her back to the dance, to the life left behind. Life is short. Humans are tenacious. The odds are impossible. We still try to hang on. I experienced the precarity of life and the tenacity of human nature when in 2024 I had a cancer diagnosis. I started throwing up blood 3 weeks before Christmas. I went to the ER, then the ICU, then a prolonged hospital stay while I lost more blood and continued transfusions. An endoscopy confirmed a stomach tumor. Because of the bleeding, the tumor was caught early. This type of sarcoma can go undetected much longer and spread. Mine had not. I was not a candidate for chemo, so it was just get it out. That meant a full abdominal 5-hour resection to remove the GIST tumor along with part of my stomach. While I didn't have to deal with much pain over those weeks, I saw and felt my body in its fully fragile, temporary form. Through all the emotions, in between transfusions and medications, my fingers stroked the edge of a blanket, felt for a smooth edge of a pillowcase. My toes spread and squeezed. My breath expanded my ribs and belly. I took pleasure and solace in small things, small movements, and reminded myself that I was still in this body. After surgery, the pathology report was good. I am one of the lucky ones. I came home on Christmas Eve, almost 3 weeks since that first ER visit. Christmas is always a time of affirmation for us, of quiet reflection, family traditions cherished and passed along. The symbolic homage to deep winter, in the Northern Hemisphere anyway, to burrowing in, makes the season a time of trust in the light yet to come. It's a time to shore up faith in all that sustains. I had moved through my life in multiple ways. I have collected and learned from relationships, experiences, and from all the things. The many small, seemingly insignificant, sometimes even invisible things that give so much pleasure. I have approached the exit and looked back and been offered the chance to dance more, cherish more, give more. I know now this belongs to me, this ground, this air, this seashell, and I belong where I am now, with what I have now. And one day I shall no longer, nor will any of my stuff matter anymore. I shall take one last glance over my shoulder, open my hands, and turn towards the exit. Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some of this work that's been going on. Excerpts of it. I'm going to change my glasses so I can see you. I believe it's a chance now for any questions or comments. I think there's a microphone that these lovely ladies are going to help pass around. And thank you to whoever's on Zoom. I don't think I can see y'all, but I think there's some people on Zoom.
On a very practical level, about 50 to 70 years ago, the university had a promotion and tenure committee, which I had to, fortunately or unfortunately, had to serve on. And I remember one of the applications that came through was on a choreography student. I didn't know this at the time, but this proposal was turned down by every one of the committee members, and except me. I was the youngest guy on the committee, but as a cardiologist, I didn't know beans about choreography, and so I did the wise thing. Is I basically approved everything.
Thank you.
And left it at that, and hopefully that had a positive effect on you and your department.
Sure it did. We thank you. Yeah, it's always interesting with our university having so many different fields and so many different POAs. Oh my God, I remember that, of determining what APT documents, what the measures are of success and validity in different fields, and it's very different. So those documents become very important for university level P&T committees. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so choreography is universal, but there must be a cultural effect. And I was wondering if you can address that, for example, choreography in India and you being to Taiwan, and what are the major differences and what are the major similarities?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I am working on an introduction to this collection that really clearly states my position as a white woman, Eurocentric background, that my cultural lens is specific. I can't speak to others with expertise, but certainly the notion of choreography does show up very differently in different forms. Some could even be much more community-based. The idea of a single author gets argued against in some cultures and some forms of dance where it's not, you don't have like an artist like I'm writing about making a piece that's expressing something important to me. It's a group solidarity of coming together to validate that culture's need to survive in some way. So there's just really different ways of pursuing the notion of choreography. My time in Taiwan, I was teaching at a university there that was they learned ballet and contemporary dance, mostly, for those who know, mostly Graham technique. So I was bringing a much more contemporary view of contemporary dance. But they also studied traditional classical Chinese dance that's used in Chinese opera, which was pretty darn stunning and amazing. And they studied Tai Chi. So those influences moved into their choreography, the students that made work. It was just beautiful. And I know I missed there were lots of cues in that kind of work that I had to just kind of learn by trial and error, that I didn't grow up with the Chinese classical dance. So when certain movements or certain gestures meant something to those who grew up with that, and I just love the look of it, but yeah. There was a hand up over here, yes.
Three chapters. You wonder in your plans for your book, do you plan to have any visuals? Are you going to rely on the richness of the language you shared?
Yeah, great question. So she's asking if I'm thinking about any visuals with the book. Yes, I am. There's lots of problems with it. One is sort of technical. The videos I have don't look great. They're not done with, studio film equipment. They're cameras sitting in the corner of a dark stage in theater. And so the dances are poorly represented, in my view, on these videos. The solos are slightly better because the camera sometimes comes in a little closer. This last one, Haunted, I have a couple of videos, but there's so much detail you can't see. So I'm a little conflicted whether it's helpful to have the videos available to a reader or not. So there's that. Also, music rights. I did a lot of these pieces before music rights were kind of widely talked about, and that we're doing better now as choreographers getting music rights. So in some of these cases, I may not be able to put those videos up publicly with the music. So we would have to have an instruction. Go find this recording and buy it, cue it up and watch it at the same time. So there's a technical issue there. I also feel like I'd want to get permission from all the dancers and all those group pieces. It's going to be that public, and that could be difficult. And then sort of philosophically, I'm still struggling with, my writing, as you can tell, is describing a lot of aspects of the dance. I selected parts, there's lots more. But it's also kind of getting, if you will, under the skin of the making and philosophizing, reflecting on larger life issues, which you don't do when you're sitting there watching a dance. So it's just different kind of languages going on. At a minimum, I have some photos. I kick myself, but don't have a great collection of photos. But I have some great ones of the dress. That dress, I do have some good photos of that. So if we get lucky, we'll get that in there. It's a great question, and I need to keep grappling. Anyone has thoughts about that, I'm open to hearing. Harmony, Dr. Bench.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for your presentation. It's lovely to hear your thoughts, but also the reflection on many years of making work. So thank you for making the work and for sharing it with us today. A small note is that I am seeing a trend toward illustrations as a way that people are incorporating dance movement while maintaining the privacy of the contributors and avoiding some of the music rights. So turning back to a still image, but also not a video still, which can be unsatisfying for many of the reasons. Yeah, sketches and line drawing, which can also be evocative in some of the kind of subterranean aspects.
Right.
I'm curious. So you have these 10 chapters. You've chosen a choreography to kind of structure each chapter. I'm curious, what was your process for deciding which choreographies were going to represent your entire body of work? And were you led by the stories that you wanted to tell and matching the choreography that best was a vehicle for your storytelling? Or did you want to, I'm making an assumption that you have your favorite works that you want to write about because you are a fan of your own work, hopefully. So did you select what you were going to write about first and then kind of match them with stories? Was there already an organic connection? How did that process work for you?
That's a great question. A little bit of both. Certainly, these 10 pieces are pieces that I feel good about. A lot of those 100 or 150 pieces, whatever they were what do they call that? Starter houses, when you buy, there were pieces that I had to make to get to the next better one. So the 10 that are in the book are ones that I feel I can stand up and feel proud of and good about. And they had legs, so to speak. They were commissioned by other companies. They were set on different groups every second time. Other soloists learned parts of them. Oh, Mortal is the very last chapter. I've taught that to numbers of people. So they had repeat appearances. Not all my works did. So there's that. So in terms of which came first, a little bit of both. So for example, one of my early little writing workshops was not about this. I was writing a little thing about inner critic. And I was writing stuff about having confidence and going for it and this sort of stuff. And then I thought, oh, that dance I made in 1988 called Carpe Diem. So I started to bring Carpe Diem into this thing about standing up and being brave and going for it sort of story. So that evolved. Years ago, I wrote an essay, a memoir story about a fire that is in our family. The Bobby and Papa grandparents, their house was burned to the ground by arson. And it was a tragedy in the family and a loss that never got really talked about. And I was a child. I never really knew what happened. So this deep loss is like one of my griefs that I carry all my life. So I was writing about that. And I went, oh, right. And I made a piece called Lost Stories in 1994 or something. So that pretty quickly became an overlay of the story of the fire and the story of being a child with adults kind of ignoring the children. And then the piece Lost Stories that also came about after my grandmother died. And as she was dying, my sister and I, hi, if you're on Zoom, just realizing how much we didn't know about her life. These lost stories that go when people die. So that kind of evolved. So they're a little bit, well, here's an example. This one, Haunted, I wrote that and a version of it. And then 2 years ago, had this cancer. Well, that got added because it really worked well with the theme of pleasure and small things. So there's been a kind of a works both ways. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susan, for a really fascinating kind of a explanation of your journey. I'm going to ask you if you can contextualize yourself among choreographers.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I think of choreographers knowing nothing about the profession as kind of like actors who decide to direct, dancers who decide to choreograph. You're an academic choreographer, or is that even a thing? Do they make that distinction? How typical is your career path and your process?
Great question. I've got several fellow choreographers here. Academic choreographer, no, that's not really a thing. I think that I've done well. I got fellowships, I got grants, I had a dance company, did okay. I'm not like famous to a few for a little while. So just there's that, right? No one's going to buy this book because, oh, a Susan Van Pelt Petry tell-all. Let's see, no, they're not. My name's not going to mean that much to that many people. So I'm hoping there's an audience. We can talk about that later. I've always been a dancer and a choreographer, and those are two different things. One can choreograph without being a supreme dancer. There are some incredible choreographers who've never particularly, I think, like been a prime had a dancing career and then become a choreographer. That happens, like actors to directors. But there are also people who are in movement, in the studio, in dancing, and then start making work that's phenomenal in collaboration with other dancers, maybe not on their own bodies, but with others. So I've done a little of that. I've had a strong solo dance career, and that's a little unusual. that I make group work and solo work. And I think my colleagues not here today, Susan Hadley, always said that that was quite unusual to have both those. So does that help a little bit with the context? And then frankly, there's like a thing called money and making money. And it's very difficult to do that as a dancer, let alone as a choreographer. So a lot of us do seek out these teaching positions and faculty positions where you can teach, because many of us love to teach, and it's like a pretty rich experience, and it's a laboratory for making work, and it meant salary. And then I also moved into administration. So you can see in my choreography history, there's a gap of about 14 years. I didn't make very many dances kind of in the middle because of a thing called babies and a thing called being chair. So I did a bunch before that and then some after that, but yeah. We'll hear Barbara and in the back.
I don't have a question. I just want to say I thought it was an amazing talk. It was fascinating. You're so articulate about what you're doing and the relationship between your life and movement and words. I think the book will do very well.
Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. If anyone knows a publishing house that would be interested, just that's my next hurdle.
So I had the pleasure of working with you in your administrative role.
Yes.
And it was a very good relationship. And I'm wondering if that fits into your autobiography as a choreographer.
Yeah, thanks, Lois. No, it's fun. There's one chapter called Now is the Time. It's a dance that some of you may have seen just pretty recently as I reset it on students right before I retired. It's in the book because it also had many iterations over the years. Now is the time. And in that chapter, I talk about work. And I talk about, actually at one point, talk about patterns of administration. And because I talk about my love and need for pattern, structure. I love grid. If I ever get a tattoo, it's going to be a grid. Things like that. So I talk, and the dance itself used kind of grid and things like that. So at one point, I say something about how babies and pet animals and faculty do well with structure, with regularity of structure. So you can relate. Yeah, it does show up there. I felt like I really wanted to write about. That was one where I was like, okay, I want to write about work and administration because that's a big part of what I do still. And so that's where I kind of went, oh, now is the time I can kind of fit that in. That was one of those backward ones. Yeah. Well, it is 5 o'clock, and there's more cookies over there, and I really appreciate you coming on this beautiful day. Yeah, thank you.